Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first time I heard the phrase, "do not look at the moon," it wasn't on television or a social network. It was in a plain text bulletin routed through the kind of email lists and internal channels most people never see. The subject line was all caps. The body had no signature, and it landed in my inbox at 1:14 a.m. local time in northern Chile while I was still on shift. At first, I thought it was a prank. A stressed-out astronomer venting into the void. Then the dome system started failing in ways I had never seen. My name is Tomás Rojas. I am not a professor, I am not a mission director. I am the person who makes sure a telescope can do its job when the air is thin, the night is cold, and the schedule is packed so tight that any delay becomes a political event. My title on paper is Observatory Assistant, but the real job is an odd mixture of technician, safety officer, logistics runner, and the last line of defense against small errors that become expensive ones. I work at Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory, up in the mountains above the Elqui Valley, east of La Serena. People picture observatories as clean, quiet places with one lonely scientist peering into a telescope. The real place is a small industrial site at high elevation, with the domes, workshops, diesel tanks, chilled water lines, fiber cables, and a control room that smells like coffee, dust, and warm electronics. If you want realistic, here it is. Most nights are routine, and most of the routine is not romantic. You check weather sensors. You confirm the wind limits. You verify the dome slit position. You coordinate with the night operator. You babysit cooling systems that do not care about your deadline. And you keep an eye on the people who've been awake too long. 3 days before the warning, a new lunar satellite launched. It wasn't ours. Chile is proud of astronomy, but space launches are not part of our daily budget. The satellite belonged to an international consortium with a lot of national flags in the press kit. The public explanation was simple. A new high-resolution lunar imaging platform designed to support navigation experiments, surface mapping, and planetary defense tracking. That last phrase was included because it makes politicians comfortable. The satellite had a name that sounded like a product, Luna 3R. The press releases said it would provide unprecedented detail and rapid revisit times. The technical documents said it carried a high-resolution optical imager and a synthetic aperture radar instrument. Those are standard. Optical gives you visible light images. Synthetic aperture radar can see texture and shape even in darkness. Two ways of looking at the same surface. Most of that didn't matter to me. A satellite can orbit the moon all it wants, and it will not change my shift schedule. What mattered was that 3 days after it went operational, telescopes worldwide started malfunctioning when pointed at the moon. It began as scattered complaints in professional circles. An operator at an observatory in Hawaii reported a guider camera saturating when the moon was centered, even though the exposure time was short and the moon was not full. A radio observatory in Australia reported that their tracking software threw repeated faults when the pointing coordinates were inside a certain region near the lunar limb. Someone at the European Southern Observatory's Paranal site, farther north in the Atacama Desert, wrote a short message that sounded annoyed. Moon pointing now triggers safe mode across multiple instruments. Repeatable, not weather-related. The pattern was unusual, but not impossible. The moon is bright. If you point sensitive cameras at it without the correct filters, you can overload detectors. If you point a telescope near the moon during certain conditions, scattered light can enter the optics and ruin data. Still, professionals know how to avoid basic mistakes. We also know what repeatable means. Repeatable means you can replicate the failure on command, which means it is not a random hardware hiccup. The first direct sign at Tololo was not the big telescope. It was a small instrument we used for calibration checks and training, a modest system with a camera and a mount that normally behaves like a loyal animal. That afternoon, while doing routine alignment checks before nightfall, I let the mount slew to the moon to verify the pointing model. The system should have moved smoothly, stopped, and held. Instead, it jerked, paused, and then made a controlled movement away, as if it had been told to avoid the target. A warning appeared on the screen. Not an error code I recognized. A plain sentence in the interface's status window. Pointing constraint, target disallowed. I stared at it. I tried again. The same message appeared. I checked the software settings. Nothing. I checked the time, the location, the mount limits. Everything was normal. I called up to the control room. My supervisor, Dr. Elena Alvarez, answered on the internal line. Elena, did someone push an update to the training mount? It's blocking the moon. A pause. The kind of pause that tells you the other person is choosing words. Tomás, she said, do not point anything at the moon tonight, not even the small mount. If it blocks it, let it block it. Is this a joke? I asked, then regretted the words. You don't ask a senior scientist if she is joking when her tone is flat. It is not a joke, she said. We have an advisory. We have a problem. We are following instructions. Instructions from who? From people who have more information than we do, she said. And Thomas, this is not for the general staff yet. Keep it quiet. That should have been the moment I stopped asking questions. In my job, when the director says there is an advisory, you follow it. Safety and procedure matter more than curiosity. But two things happened that made procedure feel like a thin sheet of paper. First, the internet did what it always does. Rumors escaped containment. Second, Elena disappeared. The rumors came fast and messy. Someone posted a shaky video claiming that a telescope feed went black when the moon entered frame. Someone else claimed that a university observatory in Europe evacuated the building because people were acting strange. That phrase can mean anything. People are strange when they are tired. People are strange when they are scared. People are strange when they want attention. The acting strange stories became more specific by the second day. Posts described people going silent after staring at the moon for too long. Some accounts said those people stopped talking and just sat, eyes fixed on the sky. Others said they walked away from their homes at night and were found miles away the next morning, barefoot, dehydrated, confused. A few said those people whispered about shapes on the lunar surface that were not supposed to be there. I tried to ignore it. I have lived long enough to know that once a story hits public networks, it mutates into something sensational and useless. We had a job to do. Our scheduled observations were not lunar. We were working on deep sky targets, calibration, and instrument testing. The moon was just bright background noise. Elena called a short staff meeting in the late afternoon. It was in the main control room. The long consoles were full of monitors. One wall was a projection screen showing a weather dashboard, wind speed, humidity, cloud sensors, and a forecast model. Another wall displayed dome status. The room was half practical, half ceremonial, because visiting scientists like to feel that they are in a mission control center. Elena stood in front of us with a printed page in her hand. She looked tired, but she always looked tired by a late afternoon. She'd been doing this too long and sleeping too little for too many years. There is a temporary directive, she said. We will not conduct lunar observations. We will not point instruments at the moon. We will not run any tests that include lunar tracking. If you see anything on external feeds, do not watch it. If you receive images, do not open them. If you need to confirm something, escalate to me or to Luis in operations. Do not share images. Do not discuss details outside the team. Someone in the back raised a hand. It was Martina, an instrumentation engineer who had a calm voice and a habit of asking sharp questions. Elena, is this an equipment safety issue? Martina asked. Overexposure, sensor damage, that kind of thing? Elena's eyes flicked to the paper and back up. It is being treated as an operational and human safety issue, she said. That made the room go quiet. What does that mean? Asked Jorge, one of the night operators. Elena hesitated. I could see her deciding how much to say. It means, she said, that there's a risk that looking at certain imagery could cause effects. We do not understand the mechanism. We are not going to test it by accident. That should have been enough to make everyone cautious. Instead, it did what warnings often do. It sharpened curiosity. A few people exchanged glances. Someone muttered, "This sounds like nonsense." Elena heard it. She didn't snap back. She just said, I do not care what it sounds like. We follow the directive. After the meeting, I ended up walking to the cafeteria with Luis Navarro, our operations coordinator. Luis was one of those people who could keep a site running during a storm, a power fluctuation, and a staff shortage without raising his voice. He had worked at multiple facilities. He had the confidence of someone who knows where every key is kept. We got coffee. The machine sputtered like it always did. The air smelled like reheated food and bleach. Luis leaned closer and spoke quietly. Tomás, he said, this is bigger than us. I gathered that, I said. He rubbed his forehead. I have friends at Paranal. They're not joking. They've had people in their control room who stared at a feed and then shut down. Not panic, not screaming, just stopped responding. Like a seizure? I asked. Luis shook his head. No shaking, no collapse. They just went quiet and stayed that way until someone physically moved them away from the screen. And then they didn't remember what they saw. They remembered that they saw it. They remembered feeling that it mattered. That is all. That sounds like mass suggestion, I said, because I wanted a normal explanation. Luis gave me a look. Mass suggestion does not trip a telescope's safety interlocks, he said. Mass suggestion does not cause a mount controller to refuse a target with a message that no one coded. I felt a cold line run under my ribs. You think someone hacked it? I think someone is trying to stop us from looking, he said. Or something is forcing the systems to stop us. I do not know which is worse. That night, we ran our scheduled program. The sky was clear, the wind was within limits. The seeing conditions were decent. In other words, the universe behaved like it usually does. Inside the domes and control rooms, we behaved like we were pretending nothing had changed. We did not talk about the moon. We did not joke. We did not ask for updates. People avoided looking at the windows when the moon rose, as if it were a social taboo. I told myself it was an overreaction. I told myself it was a temporary operational quirk. I told myself that once the satellite team corrected their data pipeline, or someone patched a software problem, this would fade into an odd footnote in astronomy gossip. Then Elena did a solo shift. She did not have to. Supervisors at our site could cover nights, but they typically rotated responsibilities with operators. Elena insisted on it. She told Luis she wanted direct hands-on time with the situation. She told me, in passing, that she needed to see the pattern in the faults. I did not like that phrase. I did not like the way she said it. The site has security cameras. Not everywhere, but enough. The control room is covered. Hallways are covered. Key access points are covered. We have cameras because we have expensive equipment and because high-altitude sites are not friendly places for accidents. The morning after Elena's solo shift, she did not come down from the control room when her shift ended. Luis tried calling her. No answer. Jorge went up the stairs and found the control room door closed. That alone was strange. During shifts, the control room door is usually open, or at least not fully latched, because operators step in and out to check equipment. Jorge knocked. No answer. He opened the door. Elena was not there. Her mug was on the desk. Her notebook was open. Her chair was slightly pushed back. The main monitors were on. The camera feed showed hallways and doors. There was no alert, no fire alarm, no obvious emergency. But Elena was gone. At first, the assumption was simple. She stepped out, maybe to the restroom, maybe to check something in the lab, maybe to clear her head outside for a moment. Then, Luis checked the access logs. Her badge did not open any doors after 2:03 a.m. That meant she had not used the normal exits. It meant she had not returned to her room. It meant she had not gone into any of the places that require badge access. We searched the facility. We checked the dorm rooms. We checked the cafeteria. We checked the maintenance bay. We checked the dome platforms, which are not places you wander without a reason. Elena was not there. By late morning, we were doing the next rational thing. We were preparing to call outside authorities and the observatory leadership in La Serena. High-altitude facilities have protocols for missing personnel, because weather and isolation can make a simple mistake deadly. Luis didn't want to do it until he had one more piece of information. He wanted to see the security footage. I was with him when he pulled it up. We sat at a small monitor station in the administration office, not the main control room. The office had blinds half closed against the harsh daylight. The air was warm. The fluorescent lights hummed. Luis logged into the security system and scrolled back to Elena's shift. We watched the control room camera feed from 1:30 a.m. onward. Elena sat at her desk. She typed. She checked displays. She sipped from her mug. Normal. At 1:58 a.m., she leaned back and rubbed her eyes. She looked at the main wall display. At 2:01 a.m., she clicked something on her console. The wall display changed. From our angle, the security camera showed only a bright rectangle of the wall screen and Elena's face lit by it. The content itself was not readable from the camera. That was a relief I did not understand yet. Elena's posture changed. She sat still, her hands rested on the desk, her shoulders lowered as if she had stopped holding tension. She stared at the wall display without blinking. Luis shifted in his chair. "What did she pull up?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I watched Elena's face on the grainy camera. She did not react, she did not flinch, she did not smile, she did not frown. She simply stared. Minutes passed. Elena never moved from her desk. I leaned forward, trying to see any motion that would indicate she was breathing, shifting, reaching for the keyboard. Nothing. At 2:19 a.m., the wall display went black. Not a fade, not a screensaver. It went black like a power cut. Elena continued staring at the black screen. At 2:22 a.m., the control room lights flickered. The security camera's exposure adjusted. The image shifted in brightness. The wall display remained black. Elena kept staring. At 2:29 a.m., the security camera feed itself glitched. The image broke into digital blocks. The audio, which was usually silent, clicked once. Then the feed went to a frozen frame. Luis swore softly. He clicked to a different camera. The hallway outside the control room. Empty. No Elena. He clicked to the stairwell. Empty. He clicked to the exterior camera that shows the walkway between buildings. Empty. We looked at the access logs again. No door opened, no badge used. Luis's mouth was tight. "That's not possible," he said. I found myself saying, "Maybe the camera froze, but she left after." Luis shook his head. "Her badge never opened the door," he said, "and there is no other way out of that room without breaking something." We sat there in silence, listening to the hum of the monitor and the faint buzz of lights. Then Luis did something that made my stomach drop. He opened a folder on the local security server labeled Backup. Inside were short clips saved automatically whenever the system detected anomalies. Glitches, dropped frames, sudden changes in brightness. There were 3 clips from Elena's shift. Each clip began with the control room camera view, and then, at the moment the wall display changed, the camera's auto-exposure adjusted sharply, and the rectangle on the wall became briefly visible as a blurred but recognizable image. It was the moon. Not the moon through our telescope. Not a photograph from a phone. A high-resolution feed of the lunar surface, framed and processed like scientific imagery, with overlaid data. The kind of feed you would get from a satellite or a dedicated lunar imaging system. My throat went dry. I could feel my pulse in my neck. Luis hovered the mouse over the first clip and stopped. He looked at me. "You saw what Elena did," he said. "She watched that feed. Then the wall went black. Then the security system broke." He swallowed. "Tomás, we should not open these." I nodded too fast. "We shouldn't," I said. "We should copy them and send them to whoever issued the directive." Luis's eyes flicked to the screen again. "The directive says do not open images," he said. "It also says high-resolution images are being scrubbed. That means if we send these through any network, they may be intercepted and deleted." "Then we keep them offline," I said. Luis exhaled through his nose. "We keep them offline," he agreed. He copied the clips to an external drive that we keep for internal equipment logs. It was not connected to the internet. It was a simple storage device, nothing special. He labeled it with a marker and put it in a lockbox. Then he made a phone call. By early afternoon, outside authorities were notified. The observatory leadership was notified. A search plan began. Vehicles prepared to go down the mountain and sweep likely routes. People checked the perimeter for tracks. A helicopter option was discussed, then dismissed because of cost, and because there was no reason yet to assume Elena had left the site on foot. And then, while we were still dealing with the practical problem of a missing supervisor, the emergency message hit the public. It was not dramatic at first. It was posted by accounts that looked like institutional announcements. National observatories, space agencies, scientific organizations. The message was blunt. Emergency advisory. Do not look at the moon. Do not view live feeds or imagery of the lunar surface. Limit direct visual observation. More information to follow. Within an hour, it was on television. Within 2 hours, it was a trending topic. Within 3 hours, it was a joke in some places and a panic trigger in others. People filmed the moon with their phones and posted it. Some videos were removed quickly, some stayed up. People argued about censorship. People argued about science. People argued about religion. The message mutated into myths. Some said the moon had changed shape. Some said it was a foreign attack. Some said it was a psychological operation to control the population. Some said it was aliens. Some said it was the end of the world. I watched none of those videos. Not because I was disciplined, but because Elena's still face in the security footage had burned a warning into my mind more effectively than any bulletin. That night, I could not sleep. I tried, in my room in the dorm building, with the window blinds fully closed. The air heater rattled. I heard distant footsteps in the hallway, people moving, murmuring, the facility not quite quiet. My phone buzzed with messages from friends in La Serena. They were frightened. They wanted me to tell them what was happening. They wanted reassurance. I typed and erased replies until I settled on something unhelpful but honest. I'm at work. We have no official explanation. Follow the advisory. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. I thought about Elena. I thought about her insistence on doing a solo shift. I thought about her face lit by the moon feed. I thought about the black screen. Then I thought about the lockbox. I got up. I did not tell anyone. I walked quietly down the hallway, past the common room, down the stairs to the administration office. The building was mostly dark. Emergency lights gave the corridors a dim, flat glow. It felt like walking through a ship at night. The lockbox was in a cabinet. Luis had the key. I didn't. That should have stopped me. Instead, I went to the equipment closet where spare keys are stored for emergencies. This is not a heroic confession. It is a realistic one. Facilities have spare keys, and people know where they are, even if they pretend they don't. I opened the cabinet and took the key. My hands shook as I unlocked the box. The external drive was inside, labeled in Luis's handwriting. I held it for a moment. It was light. It felt harmless. It felt ridiculous that something so small could carry something dangerous. I brought it to a small workstation in the corner office, the one we used for paperwork and inventory. It had a monitor. It had speakers. It had a standard computer. I hesitated before plugging it in. The advisory said not to view imagery. It did not say not to analyze data. The kind of loophole that only anxious people try to drive through formed in my mind. If I could extract information without looking, maybe I could understand what Elena saw. Maybe I could find a clue to where she went. Maybe the footage contained a timestamp, a coordinate, a message in the overlay. I told myself I would not play the video. I told myself I would open it as raw data. I told myself I would take screenshots and convert them into numbers. I told myself I would stay safe. I plugged the drive in. The computer recognized it. A folder appeared with 3 video files. I right-clicked the first file and selected Properties. I looked at metadata, file size, duration, codec, nothing unusual. My eyes kept darting to the thumbnail preview the system wanted to show me. I moved the mouse away quickly. I changed the file view to Details so it would not show thumbnails. I opened a command line tool we use for instrument data processing, something that can extract frames without displaying them. I typed in the file name and directed the output to a folder, with the option set to export frames as numerical arrays rather than images. It ran for a few seconds. The computer's fan spun up. Then it produced a set of files, data arrays, plain binary dumps of pixel values. No image opened. No frame displayed. I exhaled slowly. I wrote a short script to compute basic statistics. Average brightness, contrast, frequency patterns. This is the kind of thing we do when diagnosing camera issues. You can learn a lot from numbers. The script returned results that did not make sense. The average brightness was within expected range for lunar imagery. The contrast was high, but not absurd. The histogram of pixel values was unusual, with spikes at certain intensity levels that suggested heavy processing or compression artifacts. Then I ran a Fourier transform analysis, a tool that breaks an image down into its spatial frequencies. It is a way of seeing repeating patterns without seeing the picture itself. The output was a dense cluster with a set of sharp lines. Sharp lines in a frequency domain often mean repeating geometry, regular spacing, patterns. On the moon, you expect irregular patterns, craters, ridges, scattered rocks. You do not expect perfect regularity across a broad area unless you are looking at an artificial structure or a processing artifact. I told myself it was a processing artifact. Then I ran the analysis on a known lunar image from our archive. A standard calibration photo processed similarly. The frequency output for the known image was messy, natural, what I expected. The frequency output for Elena's clip was organized. That was the first moment I felt fear that was not based on rumor but on evidence. I sat back and stared at the numbers. My mind tried to find a benign explanation. The satellite feed could have been compromised by malware that overlaid a pattern, perhaps as a watermark, perhaps as an encryption method. A deliberate pattern could be used to embed data. It could also be used to attack computer vision systems. But Elena was not a computer vision system. She was a human being. I remembered Luisa's words, human safety issue. I looked down at my hands. They were sweaty. My heart was beating too fast. I should have stopped there. I should have put the drive back and pretended I never touched it. Instead, I did the next dangerous thing. I decided to convert the image data into something I could perceive without seeing it. It sounds clever. It was not clever, it was desperate. I took one frame's pixel values and mapped them to sound, a technique called sonification. Brightness becomes pitch. Rows become time. It can turn an image into a strange audio sweep. If the danger was in the visual pattern, maybe sound would be safe. I ran the sonification and hit play. The speakers produced a thin, wavering noise that swept up and down. It sounded like a scanner, then like wind, then like a distant alarm. Then, under the noise, I heard a repeating sequence. Not language, not words. A regular rhythm. It was a pattern that repeated with slight variation, as if something was modulating it, as if something wanted to be noticed. My scalp tightened. My stomach sank. I stopped the audio. The room seemed suddenly too quiet. I sat there, breathing slowly, forcing my hands to unclench. My mind did what it always does when faced with something it cannot categorize. It tried to rationalize. Patterns can appear in data for many reasons. Compression can create repeating artifacts. A camera can have defective rows or columns. A feed can carry an overlay grid. So I did another comparison. I sonified a known lunar image. The sound was different. Messier, no repeating rhythm. I leaned forward. Eyes on the screen were only numbers and file names appeared. I did not want to look at a single frame. I did not want to open an image viewer and see the moon. But I also could not stop, because Elena was missing, and the last time she was seen, she was staring at this feed like it was the only thing in the world. I forced myself to stand up and walk to the door. I looked out into the hallway. Empty. I locked the office door behind me. Not because a lock would stop anyone determined, but because it made me feel less exposed. Then I opened a text file and started writing a log, the way we do when something goes wrong. Time, action, result. It was a habit. Habits keep you functional. 2:47 a.m. Retrieved external drive containing security anomaly clips. Extracted numerical frame data without viewing images. Frequency analysis indicates high regularity not consistent with the typical lunar surface. Sonification indicates repeating pattern. No visual exposure. My eyes blurred. I blinked hard. A thought came into my mind with a cold clarity. If this thing was dangerous, I might already be interacting with it in a way that mattered. If it was not just visual but informational, then my clever avoidance might be meaningless. I did not want to believe that. I wanted the danger to be simple. Do not look. Close your blinds. Avoid the moon. But the world had already proven it could be more complicated. I made myself step away from the computer. I put the drive in my pocket, then thought better and put it in a desk drawer. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, as if distance would help. I listened for footsteps. None came. Time crawled. Around 3:30 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Luis. "Where are you?" I stared at it, my throat tightened. I typed, in admin, checking inventory, couldn't sleep. A pause. Then, do not do anything with the drive. Do you understand? My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, understood. It was a lie. Or at least, it was no longer fully true. I waited a few minutes, then wrote, any news on Elena? Luis replied, nothing. Police en route. Keep your head down. I put the phone face down on the floor and closed my eyes. When I closed my eyes, I saw the faint after-image of the bright rectangle from the security camera clip, even though I had never actually watched it. My brain filled in the shape anyway. The moon is familiar enough that you can imagine it without being shown. I forced myself to think about other things. The smell of the cafeteria, the sound of the generator, the way dust collects on equipment no matter how often you clean it. Eventually, the exhaustion won. I slept sitting upright, head against the wall like someone hiding from a storm. I woke to sunlight filtering through the blinds and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Luis was knocking on the office door. I opened it with a stiff neck and a guilty face. Luis took one look at me and knew. He did not ask if I had touched the drive. He walked past me, opened the drawer and pulled it out as if he already knew where it was. His jaw clenched. Tomás, he said quietly, tell me you did not open it. I did not open the video, I said quickly. I extracted data, numerical, no images. Luis stared at me like I'd told him I drank poison but only a small sip. You still interacted, he said. I needed to know, I said, and hated how weak it sounded. Luis closed his eyes for a moment. Then he said, we have enough problems. Elena is missing. Now the advisory is public. People are already doing the opposite just to prove they are brave. He held up the drive. This stays locked away. If we send it through official channels with proper safeguards. You do not touch it again. I nodded. I won't. Luis's eyes softened just a little. Tomás, he said, I know what it feels like, but curiosity is not a safety plan. He put the drive in his pocket and walked out. For the rest of the day, the observatory felt like a place under siege without enemies. Vehicles arrived from town. Police officers in heavy jackets looked out of place among scientists and technicians. Questions flew. Statements were recorded. Everyone repeated the same facts. Elena went missing after a solo shift. The last confirmed camera view shows her at her desk. No one saw her leave. No one knows where she went. Outside, reporters began to gather at the base of the access road. They wanted comments about the moon advisory. They wanted to know if we had seen it. They wanted drama. Our leadership ordered us not to speak. Meanwhile, the advisory evolved. New messages appeared on official channels. They were more detailed. They used cautious language that sounded like lawyers wrote it with scientists watching. They said, avoid direct observation of the moon. Avoid viewing high-resolution imagery. If you must perform lunar-related operations, use automated systems with restricted display methods. Do not allow human operators to view unfiltered feeds. Use physical covers on windows if necessary. That last part made my skin prickle. If official bodies are telling people to cover windows, this is not just about telescopes. Then the stories of people acting strange became harder to dismiss because they stopped being vague. Local news in several countries reported incidents of individuals leaving their homes at night and being found far from their starting point. Doctors described dehydration and confusion. Police described people who would not answer questions. Some described people who kept repeating that they needed to go somewhere, but they could not describe where. The word collapse began to show up. Not the global collapse kind, the physical kind. People walking until their bodies gave out. It was not presented as a trend. It was presented as a rare symptom, but it was spreading. I watched the official press conference from our cafeteria because someone had left the television on. A serious-looking representative from a space agency stood at a podium and said all the expected things: investigation, safety, cooperation, public calm. Then a journalist asked a direct question: "Has the lunar surface changed?" The representative paused, then said, "We have detected anomalies in certain imaging products. We are treating this as a data integrity and safety issue." Data integrity. That phrase means the data might be wrong. It also means the data might be manipulated. But the emergency message did not say, "The data is wrong." It said, "Do not look." That night, I was assigned to assist the operations team not because my normal tasks required it, but because they wanted extra eyes and hands. The missing supervisor situation had strained staff. People were tense. We had police on site. We had leadership calling every hour. And we had the moon rising again, on schedule, indifferent. We kept the curtains drawn in the common areas. We taped cardboard over a few windows where blinds didn't fully close. It felt absurd. It also felt necessary. At 9:30 p.m., Martina pulled me aside near the equipment racks. "You look bad," she said. "I didn't sleep," I said. She tilted her head. "Is it Elena?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Martina lowered her voice. "I have a friend at Cerro Pachon," she said, referring to the mountain where the Gemini South telescope is located. They had a technician who watched a satellite image for less than a minute. He didn't pass out. He didn't scream. He just took off his headset, stood up, and walked out of the control room. He walked down the mountain road on foot. They found him at dawn sitting on a rock, staring toward where the moon had been. My mouth went dry. Did he say what he saw? Martina shook her head. He said, "It's not the moon. That's all." The phrase hit me with a force I did not like. It's not the moon. We treat the moon as a familiar object because it has been there our whole lives. We have mapped it. We have landed on it. We have photographed it with ridiculous detail. It is not supposed to be unknown. At midnight, Luis called an internal meeting with a smaller group. Me, Martina, Jorge, and a visiting scientist named Dr. Pavel Novak, who had been stuck on site because of the missing person situation and flight disruptions. Pavel was Czech, worked with imaging pipelines, and had the haunted look of someone who had not slept in 2 days. Luis closed the door and said, "We have a problem. The higher-ups are asking if we have any local data. The answer is officially no, but we have Elena's security anomalies." He looked at me briefly. The look said, "I know what you did, and I'm not ready to fight about it." Pavel spoke before anyone else. "If you have high-resolution lunar imagery," he said, "do not show it, but you can analyze it in safe representations." Martina folded her arms. "Safe how?" she asked. Pavel rubbed his eyes. "We do not know what safe means," he said, "but we can attempt to reduce risk. Downsample, blur, remove high frequencies, convert to edge maps, convert to non-visual summaries." I felt my stomach tighten. That was exactly what I had tried. Luis said, "We are going to do something controlled. We will not watch video. We will not open frames. We will treat the clips as contaminated. We will extract overlays and metadata only." "Can we even trust the metadata?" Jorge asked. Pavel nodded slowly. "We cannot trust anything from the feed," he said. "But we can at least see if the overlay contains coordinates or timestamps that might correlate with Elena's actions." Luis looked at me. "Tomás," he said, "you will not do this alone. You will do it with us. And if anything feels wrong, we stop." We moved to a workstation in the operations room that had no external network connection. We brought in a portable external monitor with a privacy filter, so it could only be seen straight on. We positioned it so only one person could see it at a time if we ever had to view anything. Then Luis unlocked the lockbox. The drive came out. Luis plugged it in. Pavel set up the extraction tools. He was careful. He disabled automatic previews. He turned off thumbnails. He made sure no media player could auto-open. He extracted the first few seconds of the clip as raw data, then parsed the overlay layer separately. Many scientific feeds include overlays, timestamps, instrument status, coordinate grids. If you can isolate that layer, you might learn something without seeing the underlying image. The overlay data appeared as text: a timestamp, a feed identifier, a coordinate string. Then something else, a sequence of numbers that did not match typical instrument status. Pavel frowned. "This is not normal," he said. He pointed at the sequence, a repeating set of 4 numbers, changing slowly. Martina leaned in. "What could it be?" she asked. Pavel said, "It resembles a quaternion." A quaternion is a way to represent orientation in 3-dimensional space. Satellites and spacecraft use them to describe how they are pointed. Telescopes use them too. If the feed came from a satellite, it would make sense for it to include orientation data. Luis asked, "Can we use it to infer what area the satellite was looking at?" Pavel nodded. "Possibly," he said, "if we have the satellite's orbit and the pointing model, but we probably do not." Martina said, "We have public orbit data sometimes." Pavel shook his head. "For lunar satellites, not always," he said. "And the problem may be that the feed is being scrubbed." I watched the numbers repeat. The pattern was subtle. The values drifted, then returned, like a slow breathing. Then the overlay text glitched for a moment. A line appeared, not in the normal format. It was one sentence. "Looking is enough." Martina jerked back as if the words were hot. Jorge swore. Luis stared at the screen, then said, "Stop! Stop now!" Pavel's hands froze on the keyboard. "It could be a corrupted overlay," he said. Luis's voice tightened. "Stop," he repeated. "We are done." He pulled the drive. The screen went blank. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Horsch laughed once, a short, sharp sound with no humor. "That's not a glitch," he said. "That's a message." Pavel's face was pale. "Text overlays can be injected," he said, but his voice had lost confidence. Martina looked at me. "You did this earlier," she said quietly. "Did you see anything like that?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I didn't extract overlay. I did frequency analysis and sound conversion. No text." Luis rubbed his face. "We are dealing with something that behaves like contamination," he said. "Images, overlays, possibly data representations." Pavel swallowed. "Information hazard," he said, using a term that usually belongs in philosophy discussions, not in a control room. Luis looked toward the curtained windows as if he could see the moon through them. "We cannot help Elena by becoming Elena," he said. He locked the drive away again and ordered everyone to take a break. I walked outside into the cold night air, staying in the shadow of buildings where the moon would not be in my line of sight. The stars were clear. The Milky Way was bright. The sky in the Atacama is honest, which is why astronomers come here. It shows you what is there. I kept my eyes low. My phone buzzed again. Messages. More rumors, videos, screenshots. I did not open anything. I went back to my room and forced myself to sleep with a blanket over the window. At 6:10 a.m., I woke to shouting in the hallway. I opened my door. People were moving fast. Someone was calling Luis's name. I followed them to the administration office. A police officer stood there with a grim face. Luis was beside him. On the desk was a printed paper, fresh from a printer, still warm. It was a photograph. Not a photo from a phone. Not a social media screenshot. A high-resolution, perfectly framed image of the moon's surface. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. Luis saw me and stepped in front of it, blocking my view. "Do not look," he snapped. I froze and looked at the floor. The police officer said, "This was on the printer tray. No one claims they printed it." Luis's voice was controlled but strained. "Unplug the printer," he said. "Unplug the computer it's connected to, bag the paper, no one looks at it." The officer hesitated. "It's just a photo," he said, because he still thought this was a rumor. Luis said, "It is not just a photo." The officer looked at Luis, then at the paper, then quickly away as if he didn't want to be caught looking. "Where did it come from?" the officer asked. Luis said, "That is the question." I felt my hands go cold. The printer was on an internal network. It was not connected to the internet directly, but it connected to computers that could connect. It was also connected to our minds through habit. Print, pick up, read. If this image had appeared without anyone printing it, it meant someone had remote access. Or it meant the problem could move through systems without permission. I backed away slowly. Luis caught my arm. He pulled me aside. His grip was firm. "Tomás," he said quietly, "I need you to tell me exactly what you did last night." I swallowed and told him. Everything. The data extraction, the frequency analysis, the sonification. I did not embellish. I did not make myself sound brave. I confessed like a tired person who wants to stop lying. Luis listened, eyes narrowed, then said, "Did you feel anything? Headache? Urge to go outside? Anything strange?" "No," I said. "Just fear." Luis nodded once. "Good," he said, but his tone said it wasn't reassurance. It was a checklist. He looked toward the office door. "We are going to assume this can propagate through networks," he said. "We are going to isolate systems. We are going to shut down non-essential devices. We are going to treat this like a biohazard, but for information." By noon, we had turned off half the computers on site. We disconnected printers. We blocked external network access except for one secure line used for official calls. We posted signs. "Do not view lunar imagery. Do not open unknown files. Keep blinds closed." It felt ridiculous. It also felt like the only sane response. That afternoon, a message arrived through official channels, addressed to observatory directors and operations staff. It was signed this time. It came from a joint committee of space agencies and major observatories. It included names and titles. It said, in careful language, that Luna 3R had returned images that showed unexpected features. It said the features were under investigation. It said the imagery appeared to produce neurological and behavioral effects in a small percentage of viewers after prolonged exposure. It said no mechanism was confirmed. Then it said something that turned my blood to ice. Behavioral effects include sustained fixation, reduced speech, and goal-directed ambulatory behavior toward open areas with unobstructed sky view. People walking to places with clear sky view. People walking into deserts, fields, roads, high ground. People walking toward the moon. The message ended with a directive. All facilities should avoid lunar imaging. All public dissemination should be limited. All high-resolution images should be scrubbed from public networks. And any facility with relevant footage should secure it and report it. Luis reported our footage. Within hours, we received a response. A team would arrive to collect it physically. No network transfer, no email, no cloud. A courier, essentially, but with a scientific badge. The next night, the moon was nearly full. I did not look at it. I stayed indoors. I worked in rooms without windows. I helped Luis and Martina coordinate the isolation plan. I checked on staff. I watched people's faces for the flat look of someone who is not fully present. Around 2:30 a.m., the power flickered. Not a full blackout, a flicker. The lights blinked, the computer monitors dimmed and came back. The emergency generator kicked in briefly, then stood down. A normal response to a momentary drop. But in the control room, the wall display, which had been off all night, turned on by itself. It displayed a single word. Open. Jorge saw it first and shouted. Luis ran in. Martina followed. I was behind them. Luis reached the console and hit the power button. Nothing happened. He pulled the cable. The display stayed on, powered by its internal backup long enough to hold the word steady. Do not read it, Luis said automatically, then realized we had already read it. You can't unread a 4-letter word. Pavel, who had refused to leave sight until Elena was found, stood in the doorway and said, It is trying. Trying to do what? Martina asked, voice sharp. Pavel swallowed. To be seen, he said. To be processed. Luis grabbed a cloth cover we use for dust protection and threw it over the display. The word vanished behind fabric. Then the fabric bulged outward, as if the screen behind it had increased brightness. A faint glow leaked around the edges. Luis swore, then unplugged the entire power strip feeding that section of wall. The glow faded. We stood there, breathing hard, like we had just stopped a physical threat. And that was the problem. It didn't feel like software anymore. It felt like something with intent. Luis's phone rang. He answered, listened, then his face tightened. The police found someone, he said quietly. Who? I asked, already knowing the answer would not be good. Luis said, Elena. My knees went weak. Martina grabbed my arm to steady me. Alive? Jorge asked. Luis hesitated. That hesitation was everything. She is alive, Luis said. But she is not with us. They found her seated on the slope below the site facing east. She was dehydrated. She was awake. She would not speak. She kept trying to turn her head upward. My mouth felt full of dust. Did she look at the moon? Martina asked. Luis nodded once. The police brought Elena back to the medical room on site. We have a small clinic space for altitude sickness and minor injuries. Now it became something else. Elena sat on the bed, wrapped in blankets. Her lips were cracked. Her eyes were open and unfocused. When someone spoke, she did not respond. When someone tried to guide her gaze downward, she resisted gently, not with strength, but with persistence, like a plant leaning toward light. A medic asked her simple questions. Name, date, location. Elena did not answer. Luis asked her softly, Elena, where did you go? Elena's eyes moved for a fraction of a second, and her mouth opened as if she might speak. Then she whispered one sentence. It knows when you look. The medic leaned closer. Elena, what knows? Elena's lips moved again, barely audible. It learns your eyes, she whispered. Then she fell silent. The room felt colder. I stepped back into the hallway. My hands were shaking. I pressed them against the wall to steady myself. If this was a neurological effect, it was not random. It had a structure, a progression, fixation, silence, walking, obedience. I thought about the word that had appeared on our wall display, open. I thought about the printed photo that had appeared on the printer tray. I thought about the overlay sentence, looking is enough. And I thought about Elena's whispered words, it knows when you look. That night, after Elena was stabilized and the medic said she would likely survive, Luis gathered the core team again. We need to decide what we do with the footage, he said. The retrieval team arrives tomorrow. Until then, it stays here. Martina said, We already know it is dangerous. Pavel said, We know it is effective. Jorge said, We know it can reach into our systems. Luis nodded. So, we decide whether we destroy it, he said. The room went quiet. Destroying data goes against everything an observatory does. We preserve, we archive, we share, we publish. We do not burn evidence because it scares us. But we also do not keep a hazard because it is interesting. Luis looked at me. Tomás, he said, you wanted to know what she saw. Do you still? My mouth was dry. The honest answer was yes. Curiosity doesn't die just because fear grows. It hides behind fear and waits. But Elena was in the clinic bed, eyes tugging upward like a magnet. I said, I want to know, I admitted. But I don't want anyone else to be pulled into it. Luis nodded. Then we do this in a way that reduces risk, he said. We do not show imagery. We do not decode for meaning if meaning is the hook. We look for a practical clue. Did Elena leave because the footage contained a location? A signal? Something that drove her to go outside? Pavel exhaled. We can attempt a constrained analysis, he said. We can treat it as hostile data. We can isolate it fully. We can extract only the minimal information necessary. Martina said, and what if the minimal information is still enough? Pavel didn't have an answer. None of us did. Luis said, we do it once. We stop if anything unexpected occurs. We moved to a storage room with no windows. We brought a laptop with no wireless hardware enabled. We brought an external drive reader. We brought a paper notebook and pens, because writing on paper felt safer than trusting a screen. Pavel connected the drive. He ran an extraction focused only on timestamps and quaternion values, avoiding any overlay text that might be injected again. He printed the timestamp sequence to a text file. Then he did something I will never forget. He covered the laptop screen with a cloth, leaving only a narrow slit at the bottom where a single line of text could be seen. He positioned himself so only his eyes could see that slit. He adjusted the brightness down until it was barely readable. He said, if there is a message, it cannot be loud, as if he were talking about a predator that reacts to noise. He scrolled slowly, reading the numbers. Then he stopped. His breathing changed, not a gasp, a slow inhale that held too long. Luis leaned forward. Pavel, he said, what is it? Pavel swallowed. The pointing, he said. The satellite pointing is not tracking the moon. That's impossible, Martina said. Pavel shook his head. It is pointed at coordinates that are not on the lunar surface, he said. It is as if the camera is not looking at the moon, but through it. I felt my skin go cold. Luis said, explain. Pavel's voice was tight. If you take the orientation data and apply a model of lunar orbit, the pointing vector does not intersect the moon's center. It intersects slightly beyond, not much beyond. But beyond, Martina frowned. That could be calibration error, she said, clinging to a familiar explanation. Pavel shook his head. The drift is intentional, he said. It repeats. It is consistent with a scan pattern. Scanning what? Jorge asked. Pavel hesitated, then said, the space behind the moon. The room felt smaller. Luis's voice dropped. So, the satellite may not be imaging the moon, he said. It may be imaging something in the same line of sight. Pavel nodded once. Jorge let out a thin laugh that sounded like a cough. So, that's why people say it's not the moon, he said. Luis said, stop there. But his voice lacked force, because the next question was unavoidable. If the satellite was scanning something behind the moon, and the feed made people fixate, then the effect might not be about the lunar surface changing. It might be about something aligned with the moon, using the moon as a mask. Pavel's hands trembled. "We should stop," he said. Luis nodded. "We stop," he said. Pavel pulled the drive and shut down the laptop. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Martina said, "Elena was staring at a feed that wasn't the moon," she said. "She was staring at something behind it." Jorge whispered, "And it noticed." Luis stood up. "We destroy our local copy," he said. Pavel looked up sharply. "The retrieval team—" Luis cut him off. "We give them nothing," he said. "We give them a report. We had anomalies. We isolated systems. We recovered Elena. That is enough." Martina stared at him. "They will demand the footage," she said. Luis's face was hard. "Then they can demand," he said. "But we will not hand them a weapon." I expected an argument. I expected Pavel to protest. I expected someone to bring up scientific responsibility. Instead, everyone nodded. Because everyone had seen Elena's eyes. We went to the lockbox together. Luis opened it. He handed the drive to me. "Do it," he said. My hands felt numb. I held the drive like it was fragile. "How?" I asked. Luis said physically. We walked to the maintenance bay where tools are kept. We found a heavy bench vise. We clamped the drive in it. Luis handed me a screwdriver. My mind rebelled. This was data. This was evidence. This was Elena's last trace of what happened. But it was also the thing that had held her in a chair until the screen went black. I opened the drive casing. Inside, a small circuit board and a storage device. I pulled it out. I snapped it with pliers, not cleanly, but enough to destroy it. Martina took the pieces and placed them in a metal container. Luis poured water into it, then added a handful of fine dust from a bag we use for spill containment. It made a muddy slurry. It felt symbolic and useless, but it also felt final. When the pieces were unrecognizable, we sealed the container and labeled it. Then we all stood there in the workshop under harsh lights, breathing like people who had just committed an act they might regret later. I thought I would feel relief. Instead, I felt an emptiness, because the question remained, only now with no chance of answer. What did Elena see? The retrieval team arrived the next morning. 2 people in official jackets with badges and serious faces. They were polite. They were firm. They asked for the footage. Luis said it had been corrupted during the power fluctuation and could not be recovered. He offered logs, statements, overlay timestamps we had written down on paper. They did not look pleased, but they left. By then, the advisory had become a global routine. News anchors said it with a calm voice as if it were a weather warning. Do not look at the moon. Schools canceled nighttime activities. People taped paper over windows. Amateur astronomers unplugged equipment. Social media platforms tried to remove lunar images, and people tried harder to share them. And somewhere in the background, the satellite continued to orbit. Elena improved slowly in physical terms. She drank water. She ate. She could walk with assistance. But her gaze kept drifting upward whenever she wasn't watched. She did not speak for days. When she finally did, it was on the 5th day after she was found. I was in the clinic room with the medic, bringing supplies. Elena's eyes tracked me briefly, then locked onto my face with a focus I hadn't seen since before she disappeared. She whispered, "Tomás." I froze. "Yes," I said. Her voice was rough. "You looked," she said. It wasn't a question. I felt my face heat with shame. "Not directly," I said. "I tried not to." Elena's mouth twitched, not a smile but an expression of bitter understanding. "It doesn't care how," she said. It cares that you pay attention." I swallowed. "What did you see?" I asked before I could stop myself. Elena's eyes flicked toward the curtained window. The medic moved quickly to block her line of sight. Elena whispered, "It was not a picture," she said. "It was an instruction." The medic said softly, "Elena, you need to rest." Elena ignored him. Her gaze stayed on me. "It was telling me," she whispered, "where to stand." My throat tightened. "Why?" Elena blinked slowly. "Because it wants to be looked at without glass," she said. Without glass. Not through a screen. Not through a telescope. Not through a camera. Directly. I felt cold. Elena's eyes softened in a way that made her look older. "Tomás," she said, voice barely audible, "you think you want to know, but knowing is how it climbs into you." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Elena closed her eyes. "Do not chase it," she whispered. "Do not solve it. Do not be helpful." The medic guided me out of the room. I walked down the hallway and sat on the floor with my back against the wall, exactly where I had slept before. I thought about science. I thought about how we are trained to look, to measure, to understand. I thought about how every instrument we build is designed to capture more detail. Then I thought about the simplest warning in the world. Do not look. People treat warnings like that as challenges. They think it is about fear. Standing in that hallway, listening to the facility's quiet machinery, I understood that the warning was not about fear. It was about hunger. Whatever was aligned with the moon, whatever had been captured by a satellite and slipped into the world through images, it did not need to land on Earth or break doors down. It only needed attention. It only needed eyes and minds to trace its pattern. It only needed enough people to look. That evening, the moon rose again. I stayed inside, away from windows. But I could still feel it in the way people moved, in the way conversations died when someone mentioned the sky, in the way phones were held face down like guilty secrets. We had covered the windows. We had shut down screens. We had destroyed our copy of the footage. And still, every so often, someone would pause in a hallway, head tilted, as if listening to something only they could hear. Luis caught one technician standing at a closed door, fingertips pressed to the crack where light leaked from outside. "Come away," Luis ordered. The technician blinked, startled, and stepped back like he had been caught stealing. He did not explain what he was doing. He did not need to. That night, I recorded this as a voice note on a handheld recorder, not my phone, because my phone felt too connected to the world now. I said my name. I said my location. I said the date. I described Elena's disappearance as plainly as I could. I described the security footage without showing it. I described the overlay message. I described the printed photo. I described Elena's words. I did not speculate about aliens or conspiracies. I did not add drama. I ended with one sentence because it was the only sentence that mattered. Do not look at the moon. Then I turned the recorder off and placed it in a metal box with other emergency supplies. Because if this spreads the way it looks like it will, someone will eventually come to this facility when the power is out and the internet is dead, and they will find a place full of covered windows and empty chairs and instruments pointed away from the sky. And if they are smart, they will not look for answers first. They will look for warnings. In the early hours before dawn, when the site was quiet and the air was still, I heard a sound outside that made my body go rigid. A soft tap against glass. Then another. Then a slow, deliberate series of taps along the window frame. I did not move. I did not go to the window. I did not pull the curtain. I sat on the bed and stared at the floor, breathing through my nose, counting seconds the way you count during a safety drill. The tapping stopped. I waited. Minutes passed. Then, from somewhere in the corridor, I heard a voice. Low, calm, familiar. "Elena," someone whispered. It was not Elena's voice. It was someone else's voice using her name the way a person uses a key. I stayed silent. I kept my eyes down. I did not move. And in the darkness behind my closed blinds, I felt the presence of a bright circle in the sky that had been there my whole life, and I understood, with a clarity that made my stomach twist, that the hardest part of the warning was not the fear. The hardest part was the part of you that wants to check. Just once. Just a glance. Just to be sure. Because the message we received was true in the simplest way possible. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.